good afternoon or good morning. So it depends how you will when you started your day. So first of all, I apologize for my worst English. If you will not understand something, you can just ask a question. So the PPP, the public-private partnership, is very like a simple but at the same time complicated topic. Just a few minutes ago, my colleague Bilal asked, does the Humphrey program can be considered as a PPP? Because I and my colleagues, we are Humphrey Fellows here in Maxwell. So in general, many people, they think that any interaction between the government side and any private side, they think that it's a PPP. However, it's not PPP. Of course, generally we can say it's like a PPP because like both sides are involved in this issue or action. But the PPP, which I will try to explain today, is the PPP is a special tool where the governments try to implement their infrastructure projects, especially for social benefits. Sectors like transportation, like in US, most common is roads. Everybody saw, the toll roads. So it's exactly the PPP project. Why they implemented this toll road system? Because if you will compare the regular roads with the toll roads, you will see difference that the regular roads, sometimes it has, they are not so perfect. You can see some garbage, for example. You can see some crash. You can see some dents on the road. But on toll roads, you will see that they are almost perfect. I mean, there is no issue. Because why? Because in these projects, like roads, they are like long-term projects. It's usually they sign the contract for 20, 40 years. And then the private side, the company who is owning this road, they are responsible for taking care of this road. So for the whole period of this, when the agreement is alive. So they should take care of the safety, they should take care of the, that the road should be very, it should be like in proper quality, like everybody is accepting. The worldwide, the PPP is very, nowadays it's very popular, but actually the PPP was started implemented in early 80s in the United Kingdom when Margaret Thatcher, she offered this idea because of the budget deficit of the country. So the private companies, who has money, who has the capital, they offered this idea that they can invest, they can build all objects which are useful for the community. So for example, if anybody was in London and ride the London subway, so this subway was built by PPP mechanism. Once the PPP, like the country where it was started, like UK, England, but except of the UK, it was implemented in other countries as well, like in US, in neighbor Canada, in Europe, in Australia. But the stages of development are different. So there are like 3 stages of development of the PPP. So the UK, Australia, and I think France, just like 2-3 countries who is on the 3rd level, who is already on advanced level. For example, US and Canada, then some other European countries, they are on the 2nd level. But the countries like our countries, like Kazakhstan, India, Pakistan, Philippines, they are on their 1st stage. The PPP, the idea of PPP is promoted by many international organizations like World Bank, International Financial Corporations, United Nations, USAID, by the governments who is interesting, because governments, they are mostly interested in PPP for two reasons. When they have a shortage of budget and they have this necessity to build some social infrastructure like hospitals, like schools, like kindergartens, like even the simple roads, bridges, tunnels, but the budget is very limited. So that's why they are trying to attract the capital investment from the private companies. And then once the international organization they are promoting, they are trying to put themselves as a sponsors, as they want to provide some finance capital. They explain the definition of PPP differently. And each country is also usually explain the definition of PPP differently. In India, it's something, it has some other meaning. In Kazakhstan, a little other. But the one common thing in all countries' explanation is that when the government entity sign agreement or contract with the private company, with the private sector, to provide the public social services or goods for community, when all risks, responsibilities are shared by two sides, it can be called as a PPP. But usually when we are reading newspapers or watching some TV, everybody say like, oh, like for example, Syracuse University, they hosted people from different countries, or they are teaching some, let's say, people from community. They call it as like a PPP. However, it's not that PPP, which I'm trying to explain. So I have a short video here. By the way, this is just short content, which I'm planning to introduce in this presentation. So definition of PPP, which like introduction, which I've made. Then some few examples, sectors, in which sectors they can be implemented, what kind of PPP models we have, and then another half is about the current situation in Kazakhstan. So definition of PPP, as I mentioned, there are so many, but the general one are arrangements between government and private sector entities for purpose of providing public infrastructure, community facilities, and related services. So here, like a short video, just to clearly
across
understand.
all infrastructure sectors, water, energy, transport, and social services, governments face an ever-growing dilemma. Traditional public procurement falls short of bridging the gap between available public finances and infrastructure development needs, both in advanced and developing countries. However, there is a way out. Public-private partnerships. Let's illustrate this with a concrete example. Imagine you have just taken office as a public decision maker. The first thing you would like to improve is the municipal drinking water provision, which has been neglected in the past due to the enormous task that it presents, building and efficiently managing the municipal water and sewage infrastructure. To tackle this challenge, you decide to share not only the construction of the municipal water and sewage system, but also its financing and its operation with the private sector through a public-private partnership agreement. Public-private partnership does not mean the privatization of your water services. In a PPP, the state continues to be the owner of the water infrastructure and accountable for the provision of good drinking water to the people. With the PPP approach, your government sets the stage and drafts the first plan. You then launch a competitive tender to identify the best offer from a private partner who will finance, design, build, operate, and maintain the project. Your private partner recovers his initial investment through service fees paid by the government or by the users directly. Your role is to supervise the public service provision in the best interest of your citizens. public-private partnership approach lets you plan your project over its entire life cycle, optimizing the use of available resources. With this approach, you tap the strengths of the private sector that knows better how to first attract and invest capital, how to avoid cost overruns, and lastly, how best to operate. Finally, public-private partnership allocates specific risks to the partner that's in a better position to manage them, and these are tailored to the individual project. You, as the public actor, are best suited to control such risks as permits, legal frameworks, and changes in jurisdiction and regulation. The private sector mitigates best risks related to design, cost-efficient investment, operation, and technology. Certain risks have to be shared between both the public and private sectors. For example, sufficient user demand for new projects, or force majeure. Public-private partnerships are complex legal and financial arrangements. To create a successful partnership, a government should implement a set of good governance principles. The most important of these are: put people first. Start with assessing user needs. Projects must be economically warranted and involve all concerned stakeholders. A competent and stable government partner is required to build administrative capacity for effectively negotiating and managing long-term collaborations with the private sector, to put in place adequate legal frameworks and regulations, and ensure transparent procurement policies. Assess all risks from the outset and allocate them appropriately between the public and the private sectors. Don't forget to mitigate any substantial risk to the environment. Public-private partnership can be compared to a football game, where the government sets the rules and acts as referee to ensure their compliance. Those in the private sector are then able to compete against each other on the football field, for the benefit of the spectators. The game ends with the expiry of the PPP contract and the handing over of the public service back into your hands. If your citizens were satisfied with the game, why not continue and organize the next tournament with fresh players?
Okay, I hope this case was very clear. It was very interesting.
Good selection of you.
Yeah, thank you. So, but actually that case was more related to infrastructure project, like in this case was like a water. But however, as you see in these pictures, for example, the best, let's say, the famous one, the famous PPP is the Eiffel Tower in Paris. So, as you know, it's very old. So it was also like was built by the private side, and then it was transferred to the government, and now it belongs to the government of Paris, of local government. Then there are the biggest PPP is a Panama Channel. I mean, currently it's considered the biggest PPP project. Another one is a famous the road projects, like a toll road. It's like a actually by sectors, the transportation sector is on the first place where the PPP projects usually implemented. But however, as we see on the pictures, for example, the Royal Hospital in London, it's like in the healthcare sector. It's also very one of the common sectors where the PPP is implemented. For example, in Canada, in Australia, in some European countries, many hospitals was built by the PPP tool. Another one is the airport, the Frankfurt airport. It's like one of the huge transportation hub in Europe. Like many flights are usually flights through the Frankfurt, and it was also currently it belongs to the private side. But after I think 20 years, it should be transferred to the government of Germany, especially to the local government of Frankfurt. And then the Eurotunnel is a La Manche tunnel between the France and England. What helped to reach from one country to another in 35 minutes. So it's very fast expressway. But it's just a few examples, so you can clearly understand. Sectors, as I mentioned, the most popular is the transportation. In transportation, they can build toll roads, railroads, bridges, tunnels, different channels. Education is like schools, kindergartens, building of dormitories. For example, university, let's say if university belongs to the government, let's say public university, they have the shortage of budget. They can just announce the competition that they need the dormitories. Then some private companies, either they can introduce themselves, I mean they can apply their commercial proposals, and then they can build either with the university itself, I mean together, or completely by by themselves only. But at the end, they will need to transfer to the university, like to the public side. In water, it's like water and sanitation is, for example, in many rural area, especially local governments, they don't have this infrastructure to provide with the just elementary, water supply. So usually, big companies like monopolies, they can invest their money, and then local governments, they can just go with these companies together to implement these water projects. Healthcare is just hospitals, clinics, and then like what they say, like I don't know how it's in English. It's like clinics, but when the people just can go to consult with doctors, like in some small places, villages, for example, you can provide with many doctors or with special equipment, but at the same time you need to provide some kind of first aid. So there are some stations, let's say.
Dispensary sort of.
Yeah, dispensary sort of, yeah. Then the energy. Energy is like a variety of energy, like gas, oil, coal, electricity grids. Then even prisons, for example, they also can be implemented as a PPP projects. Like there are many options. But the general idea is just for the common, they should be useful for the community, like for community needs. Models. Here I explain just some of common models. They are standing on these capital letters like BTO, BOT. Maybe some of you before you heard about them. But basically they explains like each letter stands on what? Like build, transfer, operate. So in this case, the private side will build the object, let's say the school or hospital. Then they will immediately after signing the agreement. The very important thing in PPP is the agreement, because whether this agreement will be good, qualitative, I mean it should involve all possible risks, because if you will not consider some risks, then it will bring some troubles. Then two sides, they will sue each other. So in this case, the agreement first of all important. But the models itself are just, it depends on the projects, whether this project involves some complex services or some complex services, then the model will vary, depend on them. So in the BTO, it's like they usually can be used for transportation projects. It's like a concession, long-term projects. When they are just building the road, let's say the toll road, then they're just transferring just on the agreement to the government side, but then they are operating. So, but the government in this case will be owner after the ending that certain time of period of time which are mentioned on the agreement. Usually it's in BTO case, they are long term, like between 20 and even it can go until 100 years, because there are some projects which involve very huge capital, like billions or so. Then the government, they can return back their money by some installments, so it's not easy. Then there are BOT, build, operate, transfer. So in this case, it's like middle-sized projects, like hospitals or schools, when the private side can build, and then they will operate, like they will running the hospital, but after this certain time, they will just transfer. Like difference between them is like the BTO is more strategic for strategic projects like roads, but the BOT is, of course, it's also strategic, but in BOT it's more practical things where the private side should run the hospital. But in this case, they share the responsibilities. For example, the government responsible for providing the medical service itself, because the medical service, like treatment of patients, is very critical. So you can't sometimes totally allow to do all these like operations or treatments to the private side. But the private side here, they can maintain the objects itself, like cleaning, they can provide some analysis, they can provide some meal services, the parking services. I mean, all those services where they can get the profit. DBFO, DBFM, they are usually they stand like design, build, finance, operate. When the government, they, for example, they don't have any idea of how to design perfect, let's say, airport or the school again, or again the hospital itself. Because usually if we will compare the private hospital with the public hospital, of course it depends on country to country, but in developing countries, let's say in Kazakhstan, private hospitals are usually much better than the public hospitals. So usually why they are better? Because the private side, like they are investors, they are interested in their projects, they are designing hospital on that way which will be more comfortable for patients. You know, it will be something like maybe like a 5-star hotel. I mean, you can find some hospitals. But in public side, usually governments, they have limited budget. They will just build the building itself, provide just basic medical services, and that's it. But so that's why here governments, they can say that you can design and propose your projects. And when usually government, they announce about the hospital project, they can receive, let's say, 10 different proposals, and you can just select the best technical option. You know, so if somebody will offer to build like 3 or 4 story building with the perfect services, with many high-tech opportunities, of course you will go with that one rather than with the regular basic building. And then this line, it shows whenever you select the model, the responsibilities will involve in this model. As you see, the basic one, build and transfer. Of course, you can just build and just give it, and everything is up to you. Whether this building will go down, will it crash, or will the service will be perfect or not, you don't care. So your responsibility is just to build. So it's very simple. So here is just a public. So usually we can see many objects are not in good shape or not in good quality. Usually it's like belongs to the public, to the governments. Because if the private sector, they will build from their own money, they will never build like in bad quality. Then build, lease, transfer, or the opposite totally, build, own, operate. It's like in case of private sector. Usually they are building, they are owning, and they are operating. Of course, how they will operate or how they will running this building. They will take care of this building. They will like frequently they will cleaning, frequently they will take off like what they say, restructuring. They will maintain the building. So this is the way where you can see how differs models from each other. So this part is like Kazakhstan. It's, in Kazakhstan, of course, in the Soviet time, as you know, the Kazakhstan is former Soviet country. We had many infrastructure which we had from the Soviet time, which they are very old. But then times goes, and then we see that the projects like roads or airports or all social infrastructure like schools and hospitals, they became very old. So now you need to modify, to reconstruct or rebuild them. And then we see that the country has very huge demand in each region, but however, at the same time, we have a shortage of budget. Then the government, they started to learn the international experience, especially countries like UK, Canada, Australia, where the PPP is very developed. They came with the idea of PPP. Actually, not the only Kazakhstan is like, as I mentioned, many developing countries like India, Pakistan, Russia, they are all trying to implement this tool as an alternative for the just public procurement. So in July of 2005, we implemented the first project. It was like a railroad between two stations. And here it was signed for 50 years, the agreement. So currently it's running by the private company. So in this case, company, where they are getting the profit. Especially this railroad goes to the place where there is some natural resources like some precious metals. So this company just transporting these resources to other station, and they are getting this payment for logistics. This is one. Second one is they are running the passenger like regular trains. They are getting the fee, like passengers fee, that goes to the private company. So after the 50 years, this railroad will transfer to the government itself. So we see that it's there are benefits for both sides. Like government, they will have this railroad at the end. I mean, it still now have because the people, they can ride this train to get that station. And at the same time, the private company, they are getting their own profit itself as well. Then we implemented another one successful project is electrical power transmission grid in northern part of Kazakhstan. It's also we have a region where the electricity was coming from Russia. Of course, when the electricity comes from Russia, Russia will charge fee like. It will depend on themselves. Like today they will put the fee, one fee, and another day they will put another fee. So it's not so, not so good thing. So then we decided to just to be more independent from them, and they built this grid, and it's very successful. And the population who is living on that region, they are very happy with this project. So in 2006, the government adopted the first law on concessions. And probably you know, the concession is usually it's very long-term projects. It's like, I mean, it can't be implemented to every kind of PPP projects. It's usually only for the huge projects. So then we had the airport international on the west part of Kazakhstan, which was announced as one of the best airport in 2010 in CIS, like in Commonwealth independence country, like in former Soviet countries. And it's now running by the private company. and it's doing very great job. I mean, the passengers are very happy. But before it was like very small, very old Soviet type of, airport. Then in 2008, they established the PPP Center where I'm working, and I'm working actually from the 2011. So usually, I mean, when most of things was established, most of things was done. In 2011, when I just started to work, we were working on creating the PPP development program for until 2015. We conducted the research, learned the international experience, how people doing the PPP projects in the world. And of course, PPP projects, you can find successful and unsuccessful as well. I mean, if I'm saying so many good things, it doesn't mean that PPP are perfect tool. Of course, they have many disadvantages as well, because sometimes if the business plan is not created well, or risks were not taken as well, then projects usually, they can be, or companies who is running, they can be just bankrupt, or if their calculations was wrong, so it can bring to the bad outcomes. So in 2011, we implement another project in social sphere. It's complex of 11 kindergartens, and it's very also good. We are happy. So because in that city there wasn't lack of kindergartens, but now, of course, it's not covered all this demand, but at least it was covered like some certain percentage of kids who will not able to go to kindergartens. So this is the basic stages which we've done. So currently, the first stage we already completed. It was like mostly it was related to the establishment of the center. It was related to analysis of legislation, what kind of barriers, what kind of issues we have, which we should overcome. And then another one is implementation of projects. So currently, of course, we have some problems that we don't have so many companies, private, who has this kind of capital, who can afford to invest in big projects, because it's just simply the investments are very huge. But in the same time, we have interest from foreign companies, from foreign investors. But our government prefers local investors. And then third is improvement. So, but third stage is, I think it will be when everything will be done, like when we will be like UK or Canada. So it seems like a long-term plan. Missions, so we just divided into three, like short-term expansion of the scope of application, because before we had only one concession. So just last year, our parliament, they approved our recommendations that we need to implement and use other type of PPP models. So here we show the stages. So basically how it's go. The local governments or the ministries, they are proposing that in some regions there are lack of some infrastructure. Because each region, each local government, they know what they need. Each year we're receiving many proposals from each local government that they need some hospitals, they need some kindergartens, they need some schools, they need to build some roads, they need some electric power grids. So the initiative comes from both sides, like from local governments and from the ministries. But then our center, we are working on the examination whether that region exactly needs these projects or not, because usually some local governments, they need this kind of projects that just to get some money. It's like a good opportunity for corruption again, because in this kind of contest you can deal with the private side. You can go as a partner with them and then just basically divide this capital. So once we are approving this project, our approval goes to the Ministry of Economy. Then Ministry of Economy sending the package of documents to the Ministry of Finance, and then Ministry of Finance, they are deciding to finance or not finance, if in case the project needs the money from the government side. But sometimes we have some companies who has all 100% of capital, who can build the objects totally by themselves. So here we are, of course, we are happy, but here we are trying to secure as much as we can that these projects will be built in that proper way which we need, and it will answer to our requirements. So this table is the projects we approved. Like as you see, like in transportation, there are 7 projects: energy, urban planning, education, healthcare. For example, these numbers are like looks like not so much. It's just few projects, but we received. You can't imagine. We received about 100 proposals. Like it's huge, like huge interest. But from these hundreds of proposals, we selected only this. So which means that it's not so easy and it's not so simple as people they think. Because of course I can say, yeah, I can build this thing or that thing, but then we are not sure that whether this company will run properly or whether for 20 years this hospital will properly answer to demands of population, you know. And the total amount is almost like $3.6 billion. Thank you. Any questions?
So you yourself mentioned the potential for corruption in these sort of transactions. In my country, when public-private partnership was not introduced, the corruption magnitude was this. Once PPP was introduced, corruption went out of the roof.
Yeah.
So how to institutionalize, because this model is sort of very naive. Like public sector is very honest, private sector is very honest. But in the real world, they are both like devils.
Yeah.
So how to institutionalize this sort of ideal honesty into public-private partnership?
Yeah, good question, thank you. Yeah, there are like 2 things. For example, in some countries like Australia, Canada, I've read some kind of materials where they are saying some big associations, let's say PPP Association of Canada or National Council of Canada, or PPP of Canada, they are interested in promoting this PPP. Why they are interesting? Because here there are interests of companies who wants to jump into these big projects. The corruption, of course, especially in developing countries, corruption is very, like, it's normal. Of course, it's not the good thing. But ideally, the projects, it should work for the community. And the community, they should be aware that, that this hospital or school or airport or that road belongs to the community. And then they need to know which company was winning the bidding, who was the winner of the bidding. And they need to, like both sides, the government and the private, they need to announce and they need to inform time to time about their performance. And because on the agreement they are writing all things like what kind of fixed fees. For example, if you are sending your kid to the kindergarten, you can't extend the fee which the government put. For example, if in public kindergarten the fee, let's say $100 per month, and then in PPP kindergarten you can't extend more than $100 US dollars. Even in case, for example, if they started to increase the fee, then this case, either the agreement will be, what they say,
Concession.
yeah, so, or it will be just a bad reputation for that company. So, or for example, in case of London subway, there was a, they still, I think, they are suing each other, like two sides, that the private company, they ran over the budget, and then the government, the London government, they started to buy back their, what they say, share in this project. And of course, at the end, these projects was cost them like 3 times more than at the beginning they were expecting. So of course, this kind of projects, they have, I mean, not all projects are like this. So it's just like even in public procurement, you know that many public authorities, when they drawing the budget, they are coming with one budget. But after 1 year or after some time, you see that this budget growing 2 times, 3 times, or even more. So it's same thing. Like it's difficult to control. I mean, you can't do something. So here it will depend only on governments itself, whether they are strong and whether they strongly believe in this PPP and they are really need these projects. For example, in our country, many local governments, they need these projects because the community, they are not happy with the local governments, and they are, you know, showing their, you know, like not satisfaction with their, you know, with their governments, but at the same time, they don't have this money to build all these necessary buildings, necessary projects, and then they need to show some performance. They need to complete some, you know, some priorities, and that's why they need to sacrifice sometimes with their that they will not get any money or any profit from these projects. So, well, like this, or for example, in case of in our country, that in case of airport, the company who built that airport, at the beginning they know that it's very profitable project. Of course, you can find some profitable projects and there are less profitable. So it depends on what kind of projects. If the project itself from the beginning is profitable, so usually there will not be any issue for corruption, because usually two sides, maybe you can find some hidden tricks where they can divide the profit from the project. But at the end, the community, it has these projects itself, you know, so it's like there is no definite solution for this.
How transparent?
Transparency?
How transparent is the PPP during the procurement, bidding, and even the contracts?
Okay. Transparency is also depends on the country. In developed countries, usually, for example, in UK, they showed everything on their website, like how many companies proposed their commercial proposals, what was their offers, like their technical solutions, commercial solutions, so they can easily see. And then they have a like commission, like judge commission, and then commission of experts who decides which projects are better, which solution is better. So they agree. For example, all of us, we are experts, and if my projects will be better than someone's other, they agree that. I mean, it's like voting, you know. So in this case, it's transparent. But in developing countries, again, like as Bilal said, in our country, in Pakistan or other countries, there are things with corruption. So it's like under the table. It's no matter your project is bad or good, So you're a winner. I mean, like, if you give me some money, I can just select your project as a winner. So it's...
No, you know, because you work with the PPP in your country.
Yeah.
So, like, how are you addressing this transparency issue in your office?
Okay, so in our country, we are trying to like copy the experience of developed countries. We are also trying to provide to run this competition open, like to public, that the people from community, they can be as a witnesses, then the mass media, then the group of experts. I mean, everybody can see this bidding process. I mean, of course, there are, like, as I said, like there are 3 stages, three steps. Once they are sending us proposals, then we are selecting these proposals, whether they are answering to our requirements or not. For example, if we will say we need the hospital for 400 beds, if somebody will offer us, let's say, a hospital with 350, of course, we are just rejecting them. You know, and then once they are answering to our requirements, we are just putting them open to the public, and then this group of experts or commission, they are selecting, and everybody, they can see the real result. I mean, it's not something hidden. It's not, because it's just the beginning stage. I don't know what will be after 5-10 years. Maybe it will be some issues like under the table, but luckily, at the beginning, the first 3 projects were very successful. Everybody is happy. So, but currently, we have only one problem, is that we don't have enough companies who have this enough capital budget. Okay, because one of the requirements that each company should have at least 20% of budget from the cost of the project. I mean, am I explained right or not?
Can I say it?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
It is not that difficult this time. Like in the previous question, which I said that government and private sector both are sort of not that honest and distribution, etc. In developing countries, there is another equation is emerging, like the big capital private companies, Western companies are riding on the back of World Bank and Asian Development Bank and impose their priority projects in developing countries.
Yeah.
Being a developing country, my need is education, my need is water, my need is social sector. But they impose, say, sort of $10 billion as a loan, but conditional to be implemented through this particular company on that particular profitable airport as a loan to me. Okay?
Yeah.
So is this good? Is this bad?
It's yeah, it's a tough question because it's good and bad as well. I mean, good, of course, if you don't have any budget in your country, and then if you need this project as well, and you don't have any choice, you don't have any options, other options. I mean, if you don't have your own companies, like in Pakistan, who are ready to invest to that project, of course, this, for example, in my city, we have projects of big ring road. It's like a highways. It's like billions. I don't remember exactly. Like I think $2 billion. And of course, it's difficult to find companies who can easily invest $2 billion to that project. And then we received the offers from the IFC, the International Financial, and from ADB, Asian Development Bank, who is offering their loans, but with their conditions. That, as you said, like our company, our engineering company or construction company, they should run this project. So in this case, there are negotiation starts between the state government with that international organizations, and it will depend on how they will agree, because in some cases the government, they know that whether if they will not accept this offer, then your projects will, like, basically it will not complete it. I mean, they don't have any solution. So then it will depend how you will negotiate. If you will defend your rights, that okay, I will accept your conditions, but you should also accept my conditions that it should be some. And then when you will find, you know, the balance, then you can. But it's, of course, like maybe it's not something. The solution which will which will satisfy you. But at the same time, you see that you have a necessity. There is a necessity for this project. So sometimes it depends. Of course, if the country, they know that they will find some other investors, if they are sure, of course, they can just reject that offer. That, okay, we are not accepting your offer. So, or sometimes some governments, they are going like share, they are putting some, they are not totally accepting whole amount of that loans, like let's say 50%. And in this case, you can just, usually governments, they are just bargaining. Okay, we are not accepting your whole amount, but in this case, you should accept our rules. So, but usually these big international organizations, they are, of course, they are also not satisfied with this kind of offers. And it's like this kind of decisions will take some time because, for example, we announced that projects about the ring road in 2008, and it's still this agreement, we didn't come with the agreement, we didn't sign the agreement because we received many offers, with many loans, but the governments, because they know that it's a very strategic project, and they don't want to be, you know, in charge that they will need to pay, you know, for the long term to the with many percentage.
I'd like to one quick question. I'd like to ask on the BOT because how would the government safeguard an infrastructure which would be operated by the private sector for say 20 years, and if they transfer it to the government, well, I think that infrastructure would have been deteriorated. So how would you safeguard the integrity of that infrastructure after 20 years when it will be transferred to the government for it to operate?
How?
On the BOT, build, operate,
Yeah.
transfer. How do you safeguard, like say, your government would be asking a company to build the railway and operate it for 20 years. How would your government safeguard, how would you ensure that the railway would still be as efficient?
Yes, so of course, yeah, all these details, I mean, as I mentioned, these agreements, usually it's not like 2-3 pages. Usually it's like, it's like books.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very tough job when you should involve many consultants usually. For example, consultants from engineers, consultants from construction experts, financial consultants. For example, if you know that in 20 years the railroad will, you know, will lose the shape, or it will broken, or it will, I mean, something will happen, you should calculate everything. I mean, you should forecast what can happen after 20 years with this road, and you should write all these things in the agreement, because the private company who will run this road, they should maintain this road, let's say, after each 1 year, like once per year. So after 20 years, it should be, I mean, it should be in good shape. I mean, you can't just transfer, okay, I operate 20 years and then you transfer to the government, we're in bad condition. Of course, the government will not receive these projects. For example, in Philippines, you have a F1 expressway. Yes. Yeah.
Right.